Ladies and gentlemen, if you are enjoying my videos, please click the like button. It is the only way the YouTube algorithm really notices me. I would be very grateful to you. The Rust Plague. Scary story published by Scare Fiction. Read for you by Scare Fiction. Chapter 1. The Barren Horizon. Dr. Evelyn Wright squinted through the grime on her goggles. The desert sun, a relentless hammer on the corrugated metal roof of her lab. A sigh, laced with the tang of cynicism, escaped her lips. Here she was, leading a crew of misfits, a motley bunch more likely to break a beaker than a scientific breakthrough in a glorified toaster oven on wheels, chasing shadows in the middle of nowhere. Yet, beneath the layers of jaded scientist, a spark of curiosity still flickered, a testament to the tenacious spirit that had brought her this far. Dr. Wright, they called her, but tonight, under the vast, indifferent desert sky, she felt more like Dr. Wright. Wrong place, wrong time. The wind howled like a banshee across the endless expanse of rust-colored wasteland. Dust devils danced on the horizon, mocking mirages of shimmering water that evaporated before they could be reached. Dr. Evelyn Wright squinted through the cracked windshield of the battered mobile lab, her weathered face a map of worry etched beneath her dust-streaked goggles. The harsh sunlight beat down mercilessly, baking the cracked earth and reflecting off the twisted metallic skeletons of long-dead trees. Evelyn wasn't one for theatrics, yet even she couldn't help but feel a shiver creep down her spine. This desolate landscape, once teeming with life, was now a graveyard under a sickly green sky, the aftermath of the Green Wave. An event nobody fully understood. The Green Wave had swept across the planet years ago, leaving behind the Rust Plague. A horrifying disease that slowly turned flesh to metal, a cruel caricature of mummification. Beside her, Max, the team's gruff mechanic, slammed the hood of the sputtering engine shut. His grease-stained face mirrored Evelyn's grim expression. Another busted fuel line, he grunted, wiping his forehead with a calloused hand. These parts ain't exactly growing on trees, you know. Kai, the team's ever-optimistic scavenger, hopped down from the roof of the lab, a canvas bag slung over his shoulder. In it, a meager collection of scavenged supplies, a dented canteen, a handful of stale protein bars, and a half-empty canister of coolant. Maybe there's a settlement closer than we think, he offered, his voice tinged with hope that seemed increasingly misplaced with each passing day. The youngest member of the team, Dr. Sarah Thompson, sat hunched over a makeshift examination table in the back of the lab. Her youthful face, marred by dark circles under her eyes, was pale and drawn. Evelyn recognized the telltale metallic sheen creeping along Sarah's arm, a chilling reminder of the enemy they were so desperately fighting. Sarah, Evelyn's voice was a low rasp. How are you holding up? Sarah lifted her head, a forced smile tugging at the corners of her lips. Fine, better than ever, she croaked, her voice metallic and brittle. It was a lie, a brave facade that couldn't mask the fear in her eyes. In the distance, a pulsating green glow cut through the gloom. The abandoned factory. It loomed on the horizon, a jagged silhouette against the sickly sky. Rumors claimed it was the source of the Rust Plague, a place where scientists had tampered with forces beyond their comprehension. It was a long shot, a desperate gamble, but it was their only hope. Evelyn straightened in her seat, a flicker of determination igniting in her steely gaze. We're close, she announced, her voice firm. Max, Kai, and Sarah exchanged a wary glance. They knew the risks, the stories of those who had ventured into the factory and never returned. But they also knew the truth. Without a cure, humanity wasn't long for this world. With a heavy heart, but an unwavering resolve, Evelyn steered the groaning mobile lab towards the pulsating green beacon in the distance. They were heading into the maw of the unknown, but they would not go down without a fight. The fate of humanity might just hinge on what secrets the derelict factory held. Chapter 2: Whispers in the Rust. The skeletal remains of the steelworks loomed against the bruised twilight sky, a silhouette etched by neglect and decay. The once proud smokestacks stood like hollow teeth, their silence screaming of a bygone era. Dust devils danced across the cracked asphalt, swirling debris in their wake. Dr. Evelyn Wright squinted at the hulking structure, a familiar knot of dread twisting in her gut. "Looks like a scene out of a post-apocalyptic nightmare," grumbled Max, their gruff mechanic, slamming the van door shut. Evelyn ignored his grumbling, the echo of her father's rattling cough playing on a loop in her mind. The rust plague had claimed him a year ago, leaving her with a hollowness she desperately sought to fill with a cure. This derelict factory, rumored to hold forgotten research on the plague, was their last hope. Sarah, their young biochemist, bounced on the balls of her feet, her youthful optimism a stark contrast to the oppressive atmosphere. "This is it, guys. Imagine the breakthroughs we could find in there." Evelyn forced a smile. "Let's just be careful. Abandoned factories have a way of keeping secrets." The rusted metal doors creaked open with a groan that seemed to reverberate through the very bones of the building. Inside, shadows clung to every corner, obscuring the vastness of the space. The air hung heavy with the smell of oil and rust, a metallic tang that stung their nostrils. As they ventured deeper, the silence was broken only by the ominous creak of unseen machinery, echoing from some unknown source. A single, flickering bulb cast an eerie orange glow in the cavernous room. Cobwebs draped the skeletal frames of forgotten machines, their once gleaming surfaces now dull and lifeless. A sudden clatter sent a jolt through them. A loose sheet of metal clanged against a pipe, the sound bouncing off the walls like a disembodied scream. Max, ever the pragmatist, gripped his toolbox tighter. "This place gives me the creeps. We should get out to here before something falls on us." Sarah, however, was already kneeling by a fallen control panel, tracing faded symbols with her fingertip. "Look, there's writing here. It's all coded, but what?" Evelyn knelt beside her, peering at the indecipherable scrawls. "It seems familiar," Sarah muttered, her brow furrowed. "Like the notes in Grandpa's old research journals." A shiver ran down Evelyn's spine. Her grandfather, a renowned virologist, had also been consumed by the rust plague before a cure could be developed. Could this factory have been connected to his work? As they ventured further, the unsettling whispers began. Faint at first, barely audible over the industrial symphony of decay, they seemed to crawl from the very walls themselves. The words were indistinct, like wind rustling through dead leaves, yet they left a chilling sensation on the back of Evelyn's neck. Suddenly, a spotlight flickered to life, its harsh beam illuminating a section of the factory floor. In the center of the illuminated area stood a massive machine, its intricate gears frozen mid-motion. Sprawled across the machine, scrawled in a hasty, panicked hand, were the same cryptic symbols that Sarah had recognized on the control panel. The whispers escalated, now forming a chorus of unintelligible voices. Sarah gasped, clutching Evelyn's arm. "They're talking about the rust," she whispered, her voice trembling. "They're trapped." Evelyn swallowed, a wave of nausea washing over her. This factory, it wasn't just empty. It was a tomb, filled with the echoes of those who hadn't escaped the plague's grasp. And as she stared at the unfinished machine, a horrifying question bloomed in her mind. What were they trying to build? Chapter 3: Echoes of Humanity. The air grew thick, a metallic tang heavy on their tongues. The whispers morphed into a cacophony, a chorus of desperate pleas and inhuman shrieks that gnawed Evelyn's sanity. Then, a guttural groan sliced through the noise, sending a jolt of terror through them. A hulking figure emerged from the shadows, its form vaguely humanoid but warped beyond recognition. Rusted skin, once a healthy tan, stretched taut over its skeletal frame. Jagged protrusions of metal pierced through the flesh, remnants of tools and machinery fused with bone. Its eyes, two hollow pits reflecting the flickering light, locked onto them with a chilling intensity. Sarah let out a strangled gasp, burying her face in Evelyn's shoulder. The stench of decay and rust assaulted Evelyn's senses, a visceral reminder of the plague's horrifying effects. Max, ever the pragmatist, gripped his toolbox like a makeshift weapon, his knuckles white with tension. The creature lurched forward, its rusted joints groaning in protest. It reached out with a hand, or what remained of one gnarled claw of fused metal and bone. Sarah whimpered, her body trembling violently. Creature hesitated, its head tilting as if listening to the whispers only it could hear. A flicker of something vaguely human, a flicker of recognition, passed through its vacant eyes. Then, as abruptly as it appeared, it turned and lumbered away, disappearing into the labyrinthine depths of the factory. Silence slammed back down, heavy and suffocating. Sarah, tears streaming down her face, clung to Evelyn. "It was a person," she stammered, her voice cracking. "One of the workers." Evelyn swallowed, the metallic tang of fear thick in her throat. That wasn't a monster they'd just encountered. It was a victim, a horrifying testament to the rust's cruelty. The whispers, she realized, with a sickening certainty, weren't just echoes of machinery. They were the pleas of those trapped within their metallic prisons. Max, however, remained unconvinced. "We can't afford to get sentimental," he said gruffly, his voice laced with a newfound urgency. "This place is crawling with those things. We need to find what we came for and get out of here." Evelyn straightened her resolve. Max was right. They couldn't afford to succumb to fear. The sight of the mutated worker, while horrifying, had only strengthened her determination. If there was even a flicker of humanity left within those metallic shells, then there had to be a cure. "Sarah," she said, her voice firm, "can you analyze any remnants we might find on the creature? Maybe there's a trace of the virus we can use." Sarah sniffled, wiping her tears. "I can try," she mumbled, a flicker of defiance returning to her eyes. As they ventured deeper into the factory, the oppressive silence was shattered only by the rhythmic clang of their boots on the rusted metal floor. The whispers, though subdued, continued to follow them, a chilling reminder of the horrors this place held. But for Evelyn, they now served as a morbid soundtrack, a constant echo of the suffering she was determined to end. Chapter 4: The Corrupted Core. The deeper they ventured, the tighter the factory's oppressive grip seemed to squeeze. The whispers, once a disembodied chorus, now seemed to snake around their very thoughts, twisting them with doubt and fear. Sarah clung to Evelyn, her normally bright eyes filled with a haunted terror. Max, ever the stoic, walked with a tense silence, his hand constantly hovering near his toolbox. Finally, they stumbled upon a doorway, half concealed by a rusted curtain. Inside, a dimly lit control room hummed with a malevolent energy. Flickering screens displayed nonsensical data, their green glow casting a sickly pallor on the room. Twisted wires snaked across the consoles like metallic veins, pulsing with an unnatural rhythm. Evelyn felt a prickle of unease crawl down her spine. This wasn't just malfunctioning technology, it felt malicious. As they stepped further in, A distorted voice crackled through a lone, flickering speaker. Intruder alert system compromised the voice, digitized and cold, scraped against their nerves. Max flinched, his eyes darting around the room. This place is messed up. We should get out of here before. His sentence was cut short by a sudden jolt. The entire control room lurched violently, sparks showering from the malfunctioning consoles. Sarah screamed, scrambling back against a wall. Evelyn, heart pounding in her chest, felt a cold dread grip her. This wasn't just an earthquake. It felt deliberate, a cruel play by an unseen hand. As the room settled, a holographic projector flickered to life, casting a ghostly image onto the metal wall. The image depicted a sterile laboratory, scientists in white coats, hunched over a glowing green orb. A wave of familiarity washed over Evelyn. It was the green wave, the same alien energy linked to the Rust Plague's outbreak. Then, the scene shifted. The lab erupted in chaos, the scientists collapsing with the telltale metallic cough of the plague. The once vibrant green orb pulsed with a sickly yellow light, tendrils of dark energy reaching out like malevolent claws. The holographic projection dissolved, plunging the room back into darkness. A heavy silence descended, broken only by the ragged gasps of Sarah and Max. A disembodied voice, filled with a chilling amusement, echoed through the room. "Welcome to the source." Evelyn felt a cold sweat prickle on her skin. The entity, whatever it was here. It was manipulating the factory, twisting the technology to its will. And worse, it was starting to get inside their heads. A phantom cough racked her body, the sound uncannily like her father's last moments. She saw his face superimposed on the flickering screens, a look of accusation etched on his features. Sarah whimpered, clutching her head. "It's everywhere, the rust, it's consuming everything." Her words were punctuated by terrifying visions. Cities choked by rust, the ground itself turning into a metallic wasteland. Max was muttering to himself, his eyes wide with paranoia. "We're trapped this place. It won't let us leave." The control room seemed to thrum with a malevolent energy, amplifying their deepest fears. Evelyn forced herself to focus, her mind a battlefield against the entity's assault. They had stumbled upon the heart of the problem, perhaps even the origin of the Rust Plague. But if they were to find a cure, they had to escape this room, escape the entity's clutches. With a newfound resolve, Evelyn knew there was only one way forward through the very heart of the corrupted core. Chapter 5. Descent into Madness. The escape from the control room became a desperate scramble through a labyrinth of fear. The whispers, once disembodied voices, now seemed to emanate from the very walls themselves, slithering into their minds, twisting their thoughts with cruel precision. Evelyn fought back a rising tide of nausea, her father's accusing gaze burning into her vision from every flickering light. Sarah, eyes wide with terror, clutched a bloodied scalpel, convinced the rust was spreading through her veins. Max, his once stoic facade crumbling, mumbled incoherently, his gaze darting around as if pursued by unseen horrors. The air grew thick, the metallic tang heavy on their tongues. The whispers morphed into a cacophony, accusing them of failure, of playing into the entity's hands. Evelyn saw her reflection in a cracked mirror, but it wasn't her face staring back. It was a skeletal visage, skin replaced by rusted metal, a chilling glimpse of her potential fate. Suddenly, Max stopped dead in his tracks. He pointed a trembling finger at Sarah. "She's the source. The plague, it's radiating from her." Sarah screamed, her eyes filled with a desperate plea. "No, it's not me. It's this place. It's twisting our minds." Evelyn forced herself to stay calm. Turning on Max, she pleaded, "It's the entity. It's feeding on our fear, making us turn on each other. But Max was no longer listening. He lunged at Sarah, his face contorted in a mixture of fear and rage. They grappled on the metallic floor, their screams swallowed by the factory's oppressive silence. Evelyn felt a surge of primal rage. Shoving Max aside, she grabbed Sarah and pulled her to her feet. "We need to get out of here, now." They ran, fueled by a desperate need to escape the entity's clutches. The factory seemed to warp and twist around them, corridors stretching and converging in a maddening maze. Every rustle, every mechanical groan amplified their paranoia. Then it appeared, in the center of a vast chamber, bathed in an unholy green glow, stood the entity's manifestation, a grotesque being composed of swirling energy. Its tendrils formed from jagged blades of rusted metal. Its form pulsed with a malevolent light, feeding on the terror radiating from them. Evelyn felt a cold dread grip her heart. This was it. This was the source of the plague, the embodiment of all their suffering. But before she could even contemplate a move, the entity lashed out. A wave of psychic energy tore through them, ripping open their deepest psychological wounds. Max crumpled to the floor, whimpering, overwhelmed by visions of his own mortality. Sarah screamed, her scream cut short as a phantom pain ripped through her body, mimicking the ravages of the rust plague. Evelyn remained standing, her gaze locked on the entity. It fed on their fear, but fear wouldn't save them. It wouldn't find a cure. With a deep breath, she forced her fear down, replacing it with a steely resolve. She wouldn't let the entity win. Not today. Chapter 6, A Spark of Hope. The entity pulsed, a grotesque beacon of malevolent glee. Its power washed over them, seeking to break them, to tear apart their fragile sanity. Sarah whimpered, clutching her stomach, her eyes filled with a chilling imitation of the rust's metallic sheen. Max lay whimpering on the cold floor, his once steady gaze lost in a vortex of despair. Evelyn felt the entity's tendrils of fear burrow into her mind, whispering doubts and anxieties. But this time, she wouldn't succumb. This time, the faces of the countless victims, the echoes of her father's cough, fueled a different fire within her, a defiant rage. She wouldn't let this entity win, not while there was even a flicker of hope, a chance to find a cure. With a strength that surprised even her, she shoved the tendrils back, her voice a ragged cry. It feeds on fear. We can't give in. The entity recoiled slightly, surprised by her resistance. This human, it seemed, was different. The whispers faltered, a flicker of uncertainty replacing their malevolent glee. Suddenly, a flicker of movement in the corner of her eye caught Evelyn's attention. A console, obscured by shadows, pulsed with a faint blue light. It seemed out of place, untouched by the factory's decay. With a newfound determination, she stumbled towards it. The inscription on the console was faded but legible: Project Willbreaker Prototype. Could this be some forgotten weapon against the entity's psychic assault? Hope, a fragile spark, flickered to life within Evelyn's chest. Ignoring the entity's enraged screech, she activated the console. A surge of blue energy washed over her, filling her with a sense of clarity and purpose. The whispers vanished, replaced by a deafening silence. Hesitantly, she turned back to her companions. Max, his eyes regaining focus, looked up at her with a flicker of recognition. Sarah, the phantom pain receding, managed a weak smile. The entity, its tendrils flailing uselessly, roared in frustration. It had lost control. We're okay, Sarah rasped, her voice filled with disbelief. Evelyn nodded, a newfound strength resonating within her. We are now. This project will break her. It seems to counter its power. Max, scrambling to his feet, a hint of his old stoicism returning, dusted himself off. So, what's the plan, Doc? We fight back? A sense of grim determination settled over Evelyn. We fight back. We use this will breaker to weaken the entity. And while it's distracted, Sarah, you find a way to use the factory's tech to analyze the green wave. Maybe, just maybe, there's a way to turn its own power against it. Sarah, her eyes blazing with newfound courage, nodded fiercely. I can do that. Together, they faced the pulsating entity, a ragtag team united by a single, desperate hope. Fight was far from over, but for the first time since entering the factory, a spark of defiance flickered in their eyes. They would not be broken. They would find a cure. The entity might control the factory, but it wouldn't control them. Not anymore. Chapter 7. The Final Stand. The air crackled with a renewed energy, a stark contrast to the oppressive silence that had dominated the factory moments before. Evelyn gripped the Willbreaker console, its blue light bathing her face in an ethereal glow. With each surge of energy she channeled, the entity's rage echoed through the vast chamber. Its tendrils of rusted metal lashed out, whipping through the air with a screech that tore at their sanity. It's trying to overpower the Willbreaker, Sarah yelled, her voice strained as she wrestled with a complex array of controls on a nearby console. I need more time. Max, his toolbox abandoned, grabbed a discarded metal pipe, a pathetic weapon against the entity, but all they had. We'll buy you time, Doc, he roared, charging towards the pulsating mass of malevolent energy. A wave of psychic force slammed into Max, sending him flying across the chamber. He crashed against a wall, coughing up blood. But even as pain lanced through him, he struggled back to his feet, a defiant glint in his eyes. Evelyn gritted her teeth, channeling every ounce of her will into the Willbreaker. The entity pulsed in response, its tendrils flickering, its power momentarily wavering. It was working, but the strain was immense. She felt her own energy draining, her vision blurring at the edges. Suddenly, a brilliant green light erupted from Sarah's console. A holographic projection, a complex schematic of the green wave, shimmered in the air. I found it, Sarah screamed, her voice tinged with both fear and excitement. There's a way to overload it, to turn its power back on itself. With a final surge of willpower, Evelyn unleashed the full power of the Willbreaker. A blinding blue beam slammed into the entity, ripping through its defenses. It recoiled, shrieking a sound that tore at their eardrums, its form flickering and destabilizing. In that moment of hesitation, Sarah slammed her fist down on a glowing button on the console. The green wave projection pulsed, then erupted in a torrent of emerald energy that engulfed the entity. The entire chamber vibrated with a deafening roar as the two energies collided. Evelyn, Max, and Sarah collapsed to the ground, their bodies racked with exhaustion. Their vision swam, the sounds of the factory, a dull roar in their ears. Slowly, the overwhelming energy subsided, leaving behind an eerie silence. Tentatively, Evelyn lifted her head. The pulsating entity was gone, replaced by a faint green mist that slowly dissipated into the air. In its place, a single glowing orb, pulsing with a gentle green light, hovered where the monstrous form once stood. Sarah gasped, scrambling towards the orb. With trembling fingers, she touched it. A wave of warmth washed over her, filling her with a sense of peace and rejuvenation. Hope, like a fragile flower, bloomed within her chest. This orb, it was different. It felt pure. Maybe, just maybe, it held the key to a cure. As exhaustion claimed them once more, One thought echoed in their minds: they had survived. They had won. And in the heart of the derelict factory, a spark of hope for a future free of rust had been ignited. Chapter 8. A glimmer of hope, bittersweet. The aftermath. Relief washed over them like a tidal wave. They had won. But as the euphoria subsided, a chilling realization settled in Evelyn's gut. A metallic tang, faint at first, now lingered in her mouth. A familiar cough racked Sarah's body. Max, his normally steady hand, trembled as he wiped a sheen of metallic sweat from his brow. The entity was gone, but it had left its mark. The rust, dormant after their initial exposure, had been accelerated by their proximity to the pulsating mass of malevolent energy. The victory tasted like ashes in their mouths. Evelyn looked from Sarah's tear-streaked face to Max's stoic facade, a silent understanding passing between them. They wouldn't see the cure they'd fought so hard for. The rust would claim them, just like it had claimed countless others. "It's not fair," Sarah whispered, her voice thick with despair. "We were so close." Evelyn squeezed her hand, her voice firm despite the tremor in her heart. "We did what we had to do. We gave humanity a chance." Max, his eyes dry but filled with a profound grief, nodded. "We leave a legacy, Doc, a message, a desperate race." Fueled by a renewed, desperate purpose, they staggered back towards the van. Each cough, each tremor of their limbs was a stark reminder of the ticking clock. The once majestic factory creaked and groaned, threatening to collapse around them in a final, agonizing act of defiance. Sarah stumbled, her legs stiffening with the encroaching metallic grip. Evelyn grabbed her arm, pulling her forward. "We're almost there, Sarah. Just a little further." The air grew thick with dust, the factory's ancient infrastructure groaning in protest. A colossal metallic beam groaned, shearing loose and crashing down just meters behind them. The ground trembled, sending them sprawling onto the rusted metal floor. Evelyn looked back at the collapsing structure, a sob catching in her throat. Factory, their tomb and battleground, was taking its secrets to the grave. A final stand for science. The sterile white interior of the van, once their haven, now felt like a sterile battleground. Medical supplies dwindled at an alarming rate, barely keeping pace with the relentless march of the rust. Hallucinations flickered at the edges of their vision, blurring the lines between reality and the impending oblivion. Yet, their defiance remained. They fought back with the fury of cornered animals, analyzing their own deterioration, using their experiences to unravel the plague's code. The data from the green-wave orb pulsed on a nearby console, a beacon of hope in their darkening world. "We can't let it win," Evelyn rasped, her voice distorted by the metallic coating slowly creeping over her throat. "We have to leave them a message, a chance." Max, his normally strong hand now skeletal beneath metal-tinged skin, nodded. "A chance for a cure, for a future. Legacy in the wasteland." With a final burst of ingenuity, fueled by a cocktail of desperation and fading hope, they cracked the code. The green wave, twisted by the entity, could be the key to reversing the rust's hold on humanity. Sarah, her voice barely a whisper, recorded a holographic message detailing their findings, their experiences. Their final act was a testament to the unwavering human spirit. As the metallic grip tightened, claiming them one agonizing breath at a time, their hope, like a flickering candle in the wind, remained. The camera pans out, revealing the deserted mobile lab standing sentinel in the desolate wasteland. The once vibrant team is no more, their bodies mere silhouettes against the barren landscape. But a faint signal, A beacon of human ingenuity and sacrifice emanates from the lab, carrying their message across the wasteland. A bittersweet ending, indeed. But in the face of annihilation, they had left a spark that might just reignite the flame of humanity's survival.